Hey guys, what is up? HynesZ here and welcome back to the channel. So in this video, we're going to be checking out the brand new Tsujigiri AE86 Corolla like we had mentioned in the previous video. But we're also going to compare it to my personal experience driving an AE86 Corolla in the real world. So if that's something you'd like to see, make sure to stay tuned to this video. So the Tsujigiri AE86 Corolla has a very unique driving style required, and it is one of those enjoyable cars that are, kind of a breathtaking on drifting, something that we don't get really to experience in Assetto Corsa. Now, one of the interesting things is that I've driven one of these 86 Corollas in the real world in 2016 when I was competing in my first full season of the Irish Amateur Drift Championship. And yeah, I really want to compare my experience with the virtual car to the real car. Obviously, it's been a number of years, but I'm hoping this video we can kind of encapsulate on my personal experience on it and my knowledge from that car and compare it to the virtual car and see where it lies up. Now, this car has 480 horsepower powered by an SR20 and is weighing in about 910 kilograms. So a lightweight car like this will be quite quick even with the 480 horsepower. But there's a couple of tricks to that because lightweight cars are generally not the easiest. So let's have a quick look at what it'll be like to drive it on some tracks using Assetto Corsa as our tool for this video. So the first track we're going to hop onto is Okiyama, and Okiyama is obviously one of the Virtual Drift Championship track layouts that we would have used in VDC, but it's also a real life layout as well for Formula Drift Japan. And this track I think is a great little circuit for learning about a car. It's great, you've got that high speed entry with a long drag into the inner clipping points. You've got a quick mangy flick, I suppose you could call it, down the straight. You got a nice decel after a transition, and you got quick transitions as well, and good power, long power sections. So it's great to understand the fundamentals of a car and how it works and where to work on it to improve it. And so in an AE86 Corolla, especially with its lightweight, it generally is the less weight that you have, the faster it stops, essentially. And I mean, if you know that if you throw a feather from the sky or something, it takes forever before it reaches the ground, whereas if you throw a rock or something, it happens quite quickly. And it's the same in a race car as well. So yeah, having this lightweight 86 Corolla is kind of actually a bit tricky to drive at times because it's so light, it stops so quickly. It kind of makes it more on you as a driver to ensure that you're initiating at the right time so that you can carry the right angle, carry the correct line, and you can carry, just make it easier, make it smoother, the drift smoother in general. And one of the things we're going to do to facilitate that is actually stiffen up the rear of the car and increase the rear anti-roll bar, just to try and relieve some of the grip from the rear of the car, trying to make it skip along the ground some more so that we can make the car a little bit easier to drive for us on initiation especially. Now you have to be careful with this, obviously. If you add if you take too much grip from the rear of it, you can kind of make the car a little bit unstable. So I do recommend adding in some towing and stuff like that on the rear, maybe tiny amount, just to keep the car stable, give a bit more grip back. But essentially what we're trying to do here is we're trying to make the car glide in drift or under deceleration a little bit more and slide a little bit longer. Now, like I mentioned, because the car is super lightweight, it does kind of help it doesn't exactly help with flick initiations, and you might be able to see my initiations are fairly straight line, and this is something I actually experienced in the real world with the 86 Corolla that I drove, where you could flick initiate, but it never really rotated around to the right angle that you needed to be able to power on straight away. You always had to use more handbrake in a straight line to kind of get the same effect or a more consistent effect. And I kind of feel like this is down to the lack of weight in the rear of these cars. They're so lightweight. It doesn't have enough mass, it doesn't have enough rotation of the weight transfer to bring the car around. And it's kind of interesting to experience that as well in the sim as well and kind of compare that to the real world. But it's definitely kind of a really interesting experience, and I really highly recommend you drive a car like this, as it kind of allows you to kind of understand more about certain techniques in driving. We're going to hop on to the next track here, which is the 2021 VDC layout of Mandela Park, which is the back section is what we would call it in the real world. And this is a track I would have driven in the real world as well. This is the first time I ever drove the real life 86 Corolla, which was on this particular track layout. And we actually turned right back at that little cut through right there and finished the layout there. But obviously this extra section added in, it's a bit of fun, right? I mean, it adds a bit more in, right? But you can kind of see that the car here is a little bit more manageable, especially with the car setup from earlier with the big anti-roll bar and the stiffer springs, which makes it a bit easier to handle the car in. But we're still doing a straight line entry, and it's something again that I experienced in the real world. Just have to straight line it in. The flick entry is not the most consistent, and it's not the easiest to do in a lightweight car like this. I think it kind of explains why people maybe in the lower horsepower 86 Corolla have to do a massive commitment if they're trying to do a flick entry. You see them use a lot of steering input to try and get the weight of the rear of the car to rotate around. And it's the same when you have, you know, a 500 horsepower version of the 86 Corolla with big sticky semi-slicks on the rear. And this is what this version has. It has semi-slicks. It's got an S14 rear subframe, whereas in the real world, we had about 340 horsepower. We had an S14 rear subframe in the rear from this S chassis, but we were on street tires. We're on a 225 17-inch street tire. And the thing is, you know, when you're driving a sim car like this and it's got so much grip, you have to rely much more on your driving technique. You have to understand, you know, if I initiate too early, I'm screwed. I'm never going to be able to get him back into drifting again. With the 500 horsepower, you don't really have enough power to be able to make a mistake, so you have to be like on point as a driver. And I think that's why this car is probably one of the craziest and hardest cars to drive for people in the Assetto Corsa, just simply because of all those things that I talk about. In the real world, this 86 Corolla was super easy to drive. Obviously the street tires were super forgiving, but the way the rear subframe was placed in the back of that car, obviously in 86 Corolla in the real world is solid axle, so you have no adjustment of camber or toe, for example. The real car had the S14 rear subframe, which is a great upgrade for the 86 chassis, but if you put it in incorrectly, which a lot of people do, it makes the cars very, very hard to drive, very snappy, very unpredictable, but super fast. And to be honest, you don't really want a super lightweight car to be any faster. You don't really need it to be super quick. You just need it to utilize the, I suppose, how quick it stops, which is due to the lightweight of the car. So the 86 Corolla that I drove, it was owned by Dave Egan from now Drift Games, but at the time it wasn't Drift Games, and he let me drive it for a season. And the car was maintained by Darren McNamara of Group D, who put in the rear subframe into this 86 chassis back until like 2007 or 2008 or something. And yeah, honestly, guys, it drove like an S chassis. It was crazy how good that real car drove. It was like a lightweight S chassis. And I'll never forget that experience. I can't thank Dave and Darren and stuff like that enough for the experience that time. 2016, first time really competing full time or a full season. And this particular track that we're driving on right now, which is the, I suppose, the more familiar known of the Mandela layout, would have been the track layout that I would have been the final time I would have ever driven that car. And so yeah, this kind of brings back some pretty fond memories of it. You know, Dave from Drift Games came to me, and you know, I was already working staff member at the events. He already seen me drive in 2015 with my S14 and saw potentially I had some, you know, maybe some talent or something. And I was already doing the virtual track previews. You might have seen back in those days, you know, on R Factor, some track layouts and stuff like that were being used for judging just demonstrations and stuff, and for audience demonstrations. So I was already doing that. I was already working staff at the events, and so the idea was that I would do all that stuff for free, and he would give me the opportunity to drive the 86 Corolla he had at the time. And guys, what an experience that was. You know, it's kind of the first time I've experienced what in air quotes, a professional race car driver feels like. You know, you get given the car and all you have to do is just drive it, essentially. And yeah, it was so much fun. I really did enjoy it. I drove the crap out of it, learned a lot from competing, and by the end of the season, yeah, we were in second place in the championship. And yeah, we finished second overall, but we were driving hard, and I learned a lot, and it was a very, very great season, and especially moving forward, it was something that I was very grateful for in the coming years after that, because it really did pave my way into the Irish Drift Championship in Pro-Am, and gaining partners and sponsors, you know, kind of showcasing that I had the skill to do it. And yeah, it's kind of fun driving a car like this that was super similar to that of the real car, and kind of experience similar feelings that I would have experienced when driving the real car in the virtual world. So yeah, again, like I said, super tricky car, very hard car to drive, but with a few setup changes, this car is a funnel beast. And I think one thing I learned from the sim world is that, you know, us sim drivers, because we get to drive so many different variances of cars, like what are in the Tsujigiri car pack that we mentioned in the last video, there is a lot of variety. It does help a lot adapting to each one of these cars and learning how to make them work, because once you go to the real world, or even in the sim world, you get to pick up cars way quicker. In 2 to 3 laps, you have the real car or that virtual car nailed. And the real world, that experience helps a lot, understanding how to, I suppose, apply your technique to pick up a car quicker. Which much real drivers never really get to experience, and you know, the one extra edge for us sim drivers over the real guys. So guys, that is where we're going to end it for today's video. I hope you guys did enjoy it. Now, of course, This 86 Corolla that I drove in the real world was not owned by me. I never owned it, but it was given to me to drive for a full season, and I can't thank Dave from Drift Games for allowing me to drive his own car, and obviously Darren from Group D for looking after it. It was a great experience to kind of get a full understanding of what it's like to be a professional driver, I suppose, like we kind of mentioned earlier. But it was a great year. I really did enjoy it, and yeah, really set the pavement for my, I suppose, my drift career up until now. So it's been a really good time. Now the Virtual Corolla 86 is obviously, I mean, kind of based off a replica of a prospect car or competition car like I drove, and so it's not obviously perfect. It's not a one-to-one replica. It was never intended like that, but it's quite close, and it has quite a few similarities with the real car, which I thought was very, very interesting. And so for that, it brought back for sure a lot of memories of the difficulties that I had trying to adapt to that real car. So that is obviously quite fun to experience, and obviously quite nice to remember those memories. So if you enjoy these type of stories of my career or something like that, maybe just the stories in general of what I experienced or what my opinions are on drifting and stuff, make sure to throw a comment in the comment section below, like the video, sub to the YouTube channel, and yeah, maybe I'll try and do a few more of these. Other than that, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Hope you guys did enjoy it, and we'll talk to you guys very soon. Cheers and goodbye.